believe for brands to have a future, we need to kill the elephant in the diversity room, which was class. I wrote an essay, and the essay won the John Bartle Prize for the best, I believe, essay.
What's the impact for a brand or for an agency of having a lack of class diversity on your team?
All of the campaigns that are the most successful are campaigns where they really understand the audience. There really isn't a business argument against diversity. Like, it's more creativity, more innovation, more revenue. Actually, there's evidence that diverse teams, more people want to work for them.
Welcome to Embracing Marketing Mistakes, the podcast that helps you hit record revenue and double your marketing ROI, all by learning from the world's top marketeurs and their glorious marketing mistakes. I'm Chris Norton, the founder of Abrasion, one of Yorkshire's biggest PR agencies, which I've led for over 12 years. My mission is simple: to help you, the senior marketer, grow your brand, achieve record-breaking revenue, and create a thriving business. In this week's episode, we're asking a crucial question. Can class diversity and a more human-centric approach to strategy revolutionise marketing? Well, joining us is Lisa Thompson, strategy lead at Wavemaker and founder of Common People. Wavemaker is a global media agency that helps some of the world's biggest brands grow and thrive through innovative media strategies. Common People, founded by Lisa, is dedicated to democratising access to creative careers, ensuring that talent from all backgrounds can break into the industry. Have you ever wondered if your marketing truly resonates with all audiences? Lisa's journey shows us the best strategies that often come from challenging the status quo. Together, we're going to explore how overlooking class diversity in your campaigns can actually lead to missed opportunities, and why it's essential to balance data with human intuition to drive genuine, real results. I know you're going to love this episode because it's packed with insights that will challenge the way that you think about marketing and push you to create campaigns that truly connect with all audiences. So, as always, sit back, relax, and let's hear how you can make your marketing more inclusive, effective, and impactful. Enjoy! And welcome to the show, Lisa. How are you doing?
I am good, thanks. How are you? It's sunny, which is rare, so I'm very good.
So, Lisa, why don't you tell us, you've come on the show, your background, you've co-founded a group called Common People. Why don't you tell us a little bit? I want to get into that, and I want to get, because it's a really fascinating area, but I also want to understand how you got into the industry yourself before you founded Common People, and your experience of what drove you to do that, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So I'll go back to the beginning. So I am from a place called Wakefield, which is near Leeds. And I am from a working class background, like first generation to go to uni. I think the point on uni is quite interesting because I don't think had I been finishing school today, I would have gone to university because it's really expensive. But I also think when I was at school, obviously the Labour government was in charge, and university was the thing that was always pushed. So I think from being year 8, year 9, university was kind of billed as the thing that you should do. So I went to Manchester Uni. Out of my group of friends, I kind of hadn't really thought about this until I started doing Common People stuff. But out of my kind of 6 best friends, 50% went to private school. There was me and one other girl who had part-time jobs to fund university, and none of the others did. Or they would have a job during the summer to fund kind of travelling, but wouldn't work. And I think when I went to Manchester Uni, like looking back was the first time I kind of noticed kind of differences. And this sounds like a really trivial difference, but I'm a Leeds United fan. I'm from Wakefield. So football would be the sport that I would go to. Or if we did rugby, it would be rugby league. And I just remember getting to uni and everyone was like, they had like a rugby, like Wednesday afternoon was for like athletics and it was all rugby union. And that was the first time I was like, oh, this is a little bit weird. And then I don't really know why I wanted to work in advertising. I think it might have been because Mad Men was on at the time and I thought it looked quite cool. But I got a job. So I work in Wavemaker, a media planning and buying agency in Manchester. I had decided very early on that I couldn't afford to live in London and didn't really want to. And I I think media agencies are actually quite brilliant because they seem to have proper entry level roles. Whereas when I was looking at jobs in PR and creative agencies, and they were all like exec roles where you needed to have some form of experience, which I couldn't understand how people had got. So I started doing it, worked in a northern office, very kind of accessible, never really felt more kind of myself at work than I think I'd ever did at university. And I then, I started it in 2019. I did a qualification called the IPA Excellence Diploma. And so within that course, you will do things about like theory of brand, but there was like a section that covered diversity, and a lot of reading on that area. And we had to, for our final assignment, write what you believed the future of brands was. And my final essay was about I believe the future of brand. I believe for brands to have a future, we need to kill the elephant in the diversity room, which was class. So at the time, no one was talking about class in advertising. No one was kind of even like looking at it as a metric. It wasn't seen as a thing. And so I wrote an essay. We were supposed to do an essay, a talk, and a Viva panel. A Viva panel is where you get interviewed on your essay. I, for a long time, was calling it a Viva panel. So I wrote this essay. The talk didn't happen because COVID happened, and it got the essay gets marked, and my essay was marked by someone called Jed, who I think you guys know, who at the time was the chief strategy officer at Initiative. He marked my essay and did my Viva panel, and the essay won the John Bartle Prize for the best, I believe, essay. And I don't think when I was writing it, I had really thought about me too much in it. I just thought about it being an issue. I always thought that within advertising, we forget that the people that we're trying to kind of communicate with are not the people that we like surround ourselves with. And it turned out Jed had been thinking the same thing, and there'd been several groups of people who'd had this conversation, and we kept having like chats about it post that. So I got to know Jed a little bit. When I'd won the prize, I like tweeted my essay out and got a lot of kind of response to it. Loads of people saying, "Oh my God, like I completely feel like this is a thing," and it seemed to kind of light something. And then in 2021, after me talking to Jed and Jed talking to various people, he overnight he'd read something and he tweeted about the fact we needed to do something about it. And so he was like, I'll start a WhatsApp group for people who want to discuss it. Within 24 hours, we'd filled a WhatsApp group, which at that time was 250 people. And we realized that there was like something in it. So what had started of let's get together and discuss how we feel and what we can do started into a bit of a thing. So me, Jed, and a couple of other people led to that, and we eventually got to the point where we made our kind of mission was to make common people more common in the creative industry. So we as an organisation, we try and get class talked about because it's not often talked about a lot within the creative industries. So that includes like doing things like this, talking at places, writing about it. The WhatsApp group has become this brilliant forum because we realised in advertising and kind of all marketing really in all creative industries, you're going up against like an old boys network. So people were getting jobs because they knew people. And even if there wasn't like a really obvious like nepotism of I've employed my nephew, what we also found was that actually within these industries, you often knew people who worked in it. So when you went for an interview, you knew the things to prep, you knew what to look at, you need to do that. And so people were having a bit of an advantage, and free work experience is obviously a huge thing. Like there were people who couldn't do free work experience. So the WhatsApp group has become I suppose a bit of like an anti-old boys network, and that will include people like asking for advice, So we would have people say, this is going on at work, what do you think? It will have people say, I'm going freelance, how do you set your rates? It will have people have got jobs out of the WhatsApp group, so we always share jobs, or we have people who will say, oh, I've got this awful work thing, and people will share jobs. So it's become this real community. There's a lot of like non-chat on it. There's like one very heated discussion we had about whether Sophie Ellis Beck's The Murder on the Dance Floor was a tune. It is a tune. So like a really nice kind of social group that actually a lot of people who never met but just like chat to each other. And then the third thing that we've recently started doing is events. So we had our first Common People meet up in London. We are working on an event with the Social Mobility Foundation in Manchester in September, which we're hoping to get a celeb at and a politician at to kind of lobby. And we kind of try and tackle some of the economic barriers. So we have soft launched a fund, which is essentially for people in the community who, I suppose, might need some finance to help them out. So things that we tend to support with are, I need an Adobe license and I can't afford it, or there's this training that would be really useful, or can you help me fund my entry into this competition? And we fund that through various things we do. We will kind of like ask for a fee for. So there's been some things like training that we've done for businesses where they've paid to do it. And also we have merch. We do like runs of merch. So we recently did.
I've seen your t-shirt. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, so they're good. So yeah, that is and then so Common People is found from there. It's something I'm really passionate about. I think I'm not just passionate. Class diversity, obviously there's two. Class diversity is very close to my heart. Gender diversity is very close to my heart. Obviously things that impact me. But I think we should be making all of our industries as diverse as possible, not just because it's the right thing to do, but we'll get better work. Like if you look throughout history, all of the places that have been the most creative have had diversity ingrained into it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? And I've read various research that suggests, particularly in creative teams, the more diverse a team, the more, a diverse team will always outperform a less diverse team. So why don't you talk about some of the benefits of a more diverse team when it comes to creativity? I mean, ultimately, it's down to cognitive diversity, isn't it?
Yeah, so in my essay, I used the hook of my essay was a book called Collective Genius, which was like looking at the most diverse, looking at the most creative companies. And in it, they identified something called creative abrasion, which is in order for you to kind of get to good ideas, you need some abrasion in it. So you need people who have different viewpoints, not conflict as such, but people with different views. And they found that the most diverse companies had that creative abrasion. There is revenue and things. There's some research by Deloitte that shows that diverse teams will make 33. They will have often an increase of up to 33% revenue versus a non-diverse team. So there's a real business benefit to it. If you look at kind of advertising specifically from a class perspective, what's really interesting about advertising and probably PR and similarly kind of marketing is advertising used to be really good for class diversity. So in the 80s and 90s, you naturally had people like coming up, you'll hear the old school stories about coming up through the post room. And BBH, like their three founders were from three very different backgrounds. And if you think about the work that BBH have done, like that Levi's ad in the laundrette is one of the best pieces of advertising today. So it increases creativity. There's also evidence about you being more innovative. So you get into more innovative solutions and being at the forefront. But like there really isn't a business argument against diversity. Like it's more creativity, more innovation, more revenue, and also actually there's evidence that diverse teams, more people want to work for them. So whichever kind of way your team is diverse, if you're diverse, people want to work with you because it's cool and it's exciting. And so actually it's a really important talent tool as well.
So, I mean, you work in Manchester, right? So you're from Wakefield, which is where my wife's from.
Oh, really?
And yeah. you work in Manchester, and have you worked in Manchester your whole career then?
Yes, yeah.
Because the bit that's interesting to me is, obviously, we've got the north-south divide as well in the creative industry. So Jed Hallam, I gave him his first job in PR, and from a working background, because I'm from a working class background, but it was he was on a previous podcast, and we told his story about how I recruited him, because he basically, I don't know, he sort of he bribed me into it with an amazing idea. But one thing I wanted to talk about with the north-south divide, in terms of you being in Manchester, because it's very interesting that you've talked about that. Obviously, I don't work in advertising. We do some social advertising, but I've worked in public relations, and I started my job in London. And a story that I tell is that I actually changed I haven't even told Will this before, but I actually changed my accent, because I'm from Harrogate, which is a bit of a posher part of Yorkshire, if you want to. That's how people from my wife's friends used to say, "Oh, you're from Harrogate, right?" But when you go down south, which is my point now, you go down south to London, and I was suddenly, they don't know what Harrogate was, so they say I was from Leeds or whatever. And I adjusted my accent so I didn't sound as northern. I remember actively doing that, so I sounded a lot different when I came back. My friends said to me, "You sound different because I've lived down there." Obviously, you living in Manchester, is quite interesting that you've said that there's a class thing there as well. So is everybody in the Manchester? Because I think of Manchester as a working class city. Do you know what I mean? So is it working class, or is it mainly private schools and stuff?
So I think where I work I actually think our class diversity is all right. I think it was only recently that and this isn't just at a Manchester level, a UK level, a couple of years ago, we removed the requirement to have a degree. So I think by its very nature, that kind of prerequisite of having a degree meant that you didn't have as much class diversity as you should have. Manchester is significantly better than London. I don't think you have as many kind of people who were privately educated, and it does have a northern vibe. But I do think there's places where class is apparent and is in there. So I think one of the reasons I chose Manchester was because I could be more of myself and feel like I didn't have to hide my accent.
It's an industry-wide issue, is it? Perhaps more pronounced in London than the southeast. I mean, what sort of stats are we talking here? So if you look at the typical, the ad industry as a whole, let's say, what kind of percentage of a workforce is working class, and maybe in PR and marketing as well? What are we looking at?
So in the UK population of working class is 39%. If you look at advertising, I think it's the last dip of it was 21%, I think. But it actually gets worse if you look at certain roles within agencies. So if you look at things like strategy and account management, it gets even worse. So they're jobs that really annoys me as a strategist, that they're deemed as really like academic jobs, and so you need this certain way of doing it. Me and Jed often joke about strategists. The strategists are always very middle class white men called Tom. It's usually the vibe. I think PR is similar at like 22%. Within that, I know that if you look at the private school population within advertising, the national UK figure is 7 to 8%, and it's up to like 18 to 19% within advertising. I feel like I need to check these stats. I feel like my brain's gone blank. But it's like 39% and versus 20%. I think that marketing is probably very similar. I don't know whether they've done kind of a census on it. But yeah, it's versus 39%, it's very significantly down.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's certain sectors. I mean, fashion, public affairs, lobbying, which will be even less working class. So from there'll be our listeners will be listening to this thinking, okay, interesting, but what's the impact? What's the impact for a brand or for an agency of having a lack of class diversity on your team? What does it actually mean, practically speaking?
So I always think like the majority of our campaigns are aimed at the national population. And I think it means that we are not that people aren't understanding of what's going on in the real world. So I think it means your audience insight suffers because you've just not got that view of what goes on in life. We probably have there'll be huge biases. There's some really brilliant research that Channel 4 did recently that was about the social grade classifications and how it's actually really outdated, because we always talk about social grade, which is slightly different to class, based on occupation, and people presume that actually people in certain occupations don't earn as much money. But you'll know that from skilled tradesmen, who people would traditionally talk about from an affluence point of view, actually probably have the type of money that we should be engaging with. I think it means that because we don't have that class diversity, we don't get better ideas, so our work and our effectiveness is suffering. And I actually just don't. I think it just means we're not as in touch with what's actually really going on in the world, and things like the cost of living crisis and all factors that we talk about impacting our industry, but we don't often really understand how it's really impacting the audiences we're trying to reach. And all of the campaigns that are the most successful are campaigns where they really understand the audience.
That's so true. I mean, how could, let's say Nike or Adidas have a campaign that wants to target young inner city kids. How could a group of privately educated middle class men possibly understand the challenges that audience are going through? And really it's true for all forms of diversity, isn't it? I mean, I know this is about class, but all forms of diversity. How can we possibly develop creative that's going to resonate if we don't understand the challenges or the issues those communities or demographics face?
Yeah, exactly. And I think at best it's not understanding it, but some of the things we've encountered within the WhatsApp group is the discrimination and the biases people have about certain brands and certain things. So people talking about certain things being chavvy, or making comments about holiday destinations, or doing that. So I think at the kind of very best, it's just you don't understand it. But what we're also seeing in places is actually the people that are trying to reach these audiences have go into it with no empathy, and often really awful biases about certain things. So I think in order to reach an audience, as well as understanding them, it's really important you have empathy, and there's just a real lack of empathy.
So if you're a marketer now listening to this and you're going, right, how can I stop us being biased? Because I've listened to what you've said and what we've discussed, and you're like, how can I stop my team being biased? How can I stop recruiting, just one class of people? How can I make it more open? So is the first thing to say no degrees then? Is that the first sort of practical step?
That's a really important first step. I think the other thing to do is, if you have that in mind, is getting in touch and working with kind of colleges and schools, so people know about the industry. So we at Wavemaker have developed a relationship with Manchester College, and so when we have our kind of entry level jobs, they recruit into it. There are things that I think the other really big thing is you need to sort out your pay structure. There are people who within certain jobs, I think particularly in marketing, but also things like fashion PR, they're expecting people to either work for free or not have a real living wage. So one really important fundamental thing to do is just pay people a living wage. We should be paying people properly. There's a huge amount of money in our industry. I'm sure if some of the big bugs got slightly less there and put that into more junior level, you would do that. I think the other thing is thinking about your culture and whether it's fit for purpose, because there's one thing recruiting people from working class backgrounds, but if they come in and don't feel welcome, then you're gonna lose them. So if you are really serious about doing it, there's a really amazing organisation called Commercial Break. James Hillhouse, who heads it, acts as is part of the Common People group, and he helps with that, but his business will audit companies to see whether they're fit for people to come into. And that came from, they used to have a program placing working class talent within agencies. And basically the people that they were matching were having such awful experiences that actually they said, you know what, we're not going to match people until companies can prove that they are fit for purpose. So another really important thing you can do is kind of audit it. Think about how you recruit. This just isn't a class thing. It drives me absolutely up the wall when we have jobs for like 16 to 24-year-olds and we put them on LinkedIn. Like, I'm not necessarily a huge LinkedIn fan. I do it for work. Like a 16-year-old isn't going to be. And also think about the people who, if you're recruiting people from a working class background, their parents probably aren't using LinkedIn. They might be working in industries where they don't use it. So they won't get that tip of go to LinkedIn to look for jobs. So yeah, just to summarize, I think 3 things: get rid of a degree. I don't believe you need it. Like, we're not doctors. Like, you don't need to have like a really technical thing. Pay a real living wage, like pay properly. But also think about where you recruit. And so make sure you're finding those people. But really importantly, if you're bringing people in, like, make sure your culture's fit for purpose. The worst thing you can do is bring people in and them not feel welcome, because either they leave or they mask who they are and you don't get all the benefits of their kind of way of thinking.
Sorry, Will, can I just ask this one question? Do you ever think, Lisa, that your class has held you back from getting a job that has gone to somebody that's from a middle class background?
I've actually been at Wavemaker, then MEC, since I graduated. So I've been there, 14 years.
4 years. 14 years, right, yeah.
I mean, I'm glad you said 4. I feel like the skin stuff was working. So I don't feel it necessarily has, because I've been there. I think it probably did when I was applying for jobs. I think I remember I was really interested in TV production marketing and just applying for BBC schemes and just not getting anywhere. Now some of that I don't like. Some of that I just didn't even get through to interview. So I think there's 2 parts of that. One is I think they probably have people with private schools or certain things on their CV that they will favour. But I also think I probably just hadn't ever really learned how to do a covering letter or a CV at school or like university. So it probably did. I think it probably did pre me starting work. But I think had I moved to London, it definitely would. Like, you can hear that there's some strong dulcet Yorkshire tones here. I'm quite a chatty, loud, like northern girl. I feel like I definitely would have had biases. And even though I haven't, we know that there are people from the group from our common people group that feel like they're not getting jobs because of their background.
Yeah. Something you said there was quite interesting about in terms of the kind of practical steps employers can take about broadening recruitment practices. So it's not enough just to kind of be passive about it and say, look, we've not got working class people applying for roles, therefore we can't recruit them. A proactive approach is actually needed, isn't it? Whereby you actually reach out to perhaps working class communities, like you said, colleges or schools, and they may not even know about the creative industries as a career option. You know, their parents might come from, traditional working class roles. They might not even know about advertising. So proactivity is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's like a really huge like irony that we work in marketing, but we're really like shit at marketing ourselves. Like, we just expect people to like find us. We're like those we almost act like those campaigns where we think we're going to go viral without putting any like money or like thought into it. So I think we're like really bad at marketing ourselves. So yeah, you've got to make a conscious effort, and that is not just where you like place your roles. It's about how you think about your recruitment practices structure. So if one thing that actually like law firms do that I think is a really nickable thing and easy thing to do is offer to pay for people to travel to interviews, because we know that a lot of people, particularly in London, if they're traveling in and out of London, the cost of a train ticket can be really prohibitive. So there's like covering train tickets, and then also like training the people that are like interviewing. So, or not even, I don't even know if it needs to be as formal as training, but we a couple of weeks ago had our Thrive program at Wavemaker that I worked on a team to kind of help design, and it's basically an entry-level program for school leavers, basically anyone, school leavers, grads, career changers that might want to come, like be new to media. And obviously when you're interviewing, like if you're interviewing a school leaver that's 18, regardless of any background stuff, they're just going to be very different to a grad, because you know the changes that will happen between being 18 and 21. So we make a point of explaining, like letting the candidates know letting the interviewers know who are school leavers and offering, so they're kind of giving a bit of background on that. And also, like, you've got to be kind of looking at, when you're getting people to interview, make sure you're getting the kind of right mix of it. So I think it's training people when they do the interviews that they don't let biases of things like impact you. And I still think people have this really weird thing that like a degree means you're like way better. Like I did a drama degree, like it was quite an academic drama degree, but like other than me being like, this sounds a bit derogatory, but other than like I can remember some cracking creative ideas, brainstorming, warm up, like I don't use all of things day to day. Like, yeah, I had a great time, I learned a lot, but I don't think I need it in my day to day. So getting people, I think there's a big like education piece to get people to not think that you need a degree, that the degree is the thing that makes you suitable.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that idea of kind of I think that a lot of what you said there is true for all forms of diversity, isn't it? And that's really valuable. Now, is this problem getting worse? You mentioned that perhaps in the 80s, 90s, class in the ad industry in particular was more diverse. Is it still getting worse? I mean, you're obviously doing some great work with common people. Are you kind of measuring the impact in any way? And what's your view for the next few years?
So I am an eternal optimist. A Leeds fan, you've kind of got to have that to like get you through life.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I actually think is that the majority of people want to make it better. I think you've got a few bad apples who can like impact people. I think you've also got a lot of people who don't start aware of it. So I think the real positives are class is kind of being a conversation more so than ever before. The Ad Association now have a census that tracks it. The IPA, after I may have kicked off at them because they didn't include class in their D&I certificate, we wrote a certificate. So there's really like positive steps happening. I think when you listen to people talk that have businesses, to people I've done, they feel really positive. The thing that's worrying though is the stats aren't moving on the census. So between 2019, they weren't getting worse, but they weren't getting better. So between 2019 and 2021 and 2023, when the census was done, the numbers were the same. So it's not moving yet, but I think you've always got to be a bit mindful with data, because I do think it takes a long time to see that come through, particularly because a lot of the initiatives are happening at a junior level, and for that to kind of then work its way up. So I think there is the potential to get better and it's interest, but people need to do the work in order to do it. So, and I also think that I think people could, lots of business like, oh yeah, we want a diverse workforce, but when like times get a bit tough or they're doing it, they kind of forget about it. So you kind of have to constantly be on it. So I don't think we'll ever have a time where we're not talking about it. The same with like gender and race, like it will still always be an issue. So I'm optimistic it can change, and we've seen good inroads, but the data isn't moving yet. So we need to keep working hard at it.
So the sectors, I mean, I don't have the data on this, but I'd imagine, law, accounting, etc. There's certain kind of professional services which I'd imagine have a similar issue with class. It sounds like the legal industry is taking some steps to kind of proactively challenge it. Have you seen anything else in other sectors, either where there's a big problem or whether there's really kind of positive steps where they've managed to kind of change things?
So the legal is one. So if you look, so the Social Mobility Foundation release an index every year that's like the top 100 advertisers for class mobility, and legal businesses are always in there. Actually, a lot of the big accounting firms like your Deloitte's, your KPMG's are people that feature. A lot of the things in the impact report, there was a legal firm, I can't remember, it was like one of those legal firms that had like multiple like letters in it, but they were doing things like, they had a program, they worked with the SMF on aspiring professional programs, and they would mentor people from areas, so help with things like their university statements, help with kind of interview practice, so getting that real life experience. So actually what's quite interesting is, I think within like marketing and PR and advertising, like, oh God, we're well diverse, we're also creative and casual. But actually the places that are doing really good stuff are the more corporate industries. So they're kind of ahead of us on it. There's like a really interesting thing about like, I don't know if you've ever read it, there's a really good book called The Class Ceiling, which I used in my essay, and it's like case studies of areas. And Channel 4, they're not named in the book, but it's quite out there that Channel 4 was the area. And they talk about like the class perceptions of it. And they talked about actually one of the biggest like issues in creative industries is like the dress code being so casual, because it's really hard to navigate if you don't do it. Like if I go to a big meeting and I tell my mum I'm wearing my trainers, she's like, what? Like, it's weird. And like when I did a talk at an IPA event, and it was in this really hard to find building. And basically the way that everyone got there was they followed like the Adidas Gazelles. So like there is almost like a uniform to like advertising. So it's like weird things that happen. And I think sometimes in corporate, the SMF will always say that, I think they said the same thing about medicine, is that sometimes the challenges in those industries are a bit simpler because it's about getting people in. But actually when you start your job, so Sarah, who's the CEO, gave me this anecdote, as if you train to be a doctor, once you get into a hospital, you put on your white coat or you put on your uniform and that's in. Whereas creative industries are a bit different. But I think the more corporate sectors are ahead of us.
They are now, but when I started out, when I was working down in London in PR, I worked for an agency called Harvard, which is obviously, it was related to the family that set up Harvard University. And everybody there, when I got there, was pretty much wearing, well, some were wearing suits. This is back in the day. This was like 1999, 2000 or something. Everyone was wearing suits, and then it became shirt and tie. And then we started working with Glaxo, and Glaxo were GSK were really cool marketing department, because they were one of the, obviously they're an American business, I believe, and they had all the marketing guys were all casual, and that was really different. Like, and then it slowly filtered through, and now like you'd be weird if you turned up to work in a suit. Maybe to a pitch you might be a bit smarter, but I do take your point, Lisa. Like casual wear, it's how to get the balance of smart casual, and trying to mirror, because you used to have a thing where you had to mirror clients. But I've heard of girls, right? They've told me stories of where other women, not just men, have said to one of the girls, "You'll have to get dressed up for this meeting," as in, like, flaunt what you've got. And I wouldn't dare say anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's also like it is weird because I think clients have got more casual, but it's like I used to go to client meetings and we dress smart. We had one client who was like really, really smart, but like this is one thing that is also like a bit of a tip that people think is like a bit trivial, but like no one knows what smart casual means. And also like being up north, smart casual is very different to like down south. Like you dress up, don't you? Like you're just a bit more dressy. I remember Jess Glynn trying to claim that she was working class and being annoyed that she got kicked out of Sexy Fish for wearing like trackies, and everyone on Twitter like from the north was like, no, we would not go to a fancy restaurant wearing that. But another really simple tip is to tell people like what your dress code is and describe it. Like don't use smart casual. So we always put on our forms, like in the office, the girls will wear like a dress and trainers or jeans and like stuff. The boys tend to wear jeans and a shirt or jeans and a t-shirt. Like this is what we're like. And I think that's really important, because I think sometimes if you know how these industries dress and you go to an interview and you feel like you've got it right, you're automatically in. But there's still people whose mums and dads will be like, wear a suit. And you'll have people come and you'll see everyone really casual and you'll see them go, oh God, I feel a bit like uncomfortable. So I think it's like telling people like the weird quirks of our industry. We had one of our apprentices from last year, who's amazing, has just been shortlisted at an awards due for Apprentice of the Year. And it basically turned out he'd been really, really panicking about like having to buy his ticket that he'd seen on the website was an amount of money. And we all realised that we never tell people that these things are free. So we like have people like panicking, and he wasn't excited that he'd been nominated for this really amazing award. So I think another tip is like tell people the weird quirks of our industry, even through the language you like use. Like I managed an apprentice a few years ago, and after like 2 weeks in, he turned to me and he was really exacerbated. And he was like, what even is a deck? Like, we kept telling him to do a deck and no one had told him that it was like a PowerPoint thing. So we all just thought deck was the word. So yeah, it's really important, like things like clothes and stuff. But you're right, like women get told to like wear a certain thing. It's really bad. And also you should just wear stuff you feel comfortable in.
So are you saying what I'm hearing here is, the kind of the nuances and the quirks of the industry, including the fact that there's a slightly confusing casual, not casual dress code, that naturally favours the insiders, i.e. the middle class people, the people that have benefited from nepotism, the people that understand that industry. And when an outsider, i.e. somebody from a working class background potentially comes into that, it's completely opaque and confusing, and they've got no way of finding out what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, and it's like weird, isn't it? And I think we forget how weird our industry is. Like, I was saying, my boyfriend works in the NHS, and I was telling him yesterday I'd been invited on a jolly, and he was like, that's ridiculous that you get invited to that. Like, it's so weird. Like, he finds it weird, like, if I go out on a lunch at lunchtime and we, like, have a drink, he's like, I remember once I'd like been out at lunch and I texted him a picture of a cocktail, and he was like, what did your boss say about that? And I was like, my boss told me to crack on and have a nice Friday. Like, for everyone else, it's really weird. And so you need to like tell people how weird it is so they feel like comfortable and don't worry about stuff and feel like they can fit in.
I think that's what Rob Mayhew's been doing on LinkedIn and TikTok. He's been teaching the crazy inside world, because like you watch his videos and they're like telling Gen Z about client drinks back in the day, and it's like, yeah, so we used to take out clients and just get leathered with them. And now you're like, probably you need to be careful around, there's certain things that we did and you can't do now, I suppose.
And it's like weird things like going to restaurants. Like, I sometimes go to restaurants and still have to like Google things. Like, I'm well into food and like get into it, but I will go and like just Google and check it. I don't know if Jed told you that Jed has talked about him going on his first client meeting. He lets me use this story about him like saying the word Dauphinoise potatoes wrong because he never saw it. Like, actually, like, sometimes you're going to these places where you would never have ever gone to in your like normal life and like do that. So I think it's like weird things like that. I love the Rob Mayhew one where he's like telling Gen Z about Fridays in the office. Like, I miss Fridays in the office. I miss when you'd had a Thursday night out and everyone was together and it was fun and you went to the pub. Like, I kind of want to like rally that after our Christmas party we all should come into the office next day for the fun.
Yeah. So this, I mean, I could go on and on and on about that. Like my first journey to the Oxo Tower, when I looked at the menu and I was like, what are all these things on the menu? I didn't talking about class. It was all in French, and it was like Michelin star. And even like the poshest of middle class people that I was with, who'd been to lots of fancy restaurants, he had to ask the when you have to ask the waiter what things are on the menu, because that's when you know it's that's when I did feel very class. What's the word? Judged, if you know what I mean. Because I didn't dare ask, like you just said with the Dauphinoise potatoes. Anyway, we could go on about that for ages.
How did he pronounce that?
So it wasn't me. It was Jed's story, but he said he pronounced it Dauphinoise potatoes.
Okay.
And he says that he remembers having this moment where he said it and everyone looked at him. I'm sure he doesn't mind me sharing this. He's told this story to loads of people, but he like that's one of the things it sounds like quite funny when you tell the story, but it's like one of the things where he first realised feeling like that. And that's like quite a soft one, where there's like worse ones that you've heard from other people. Like on our WhatsApp group, someone said that she went out for some drinks and she poured the wine up to the top of the glass because like it's normal. And like the people she was with were a bit judgy about it, or like they made like judgy comments about the drink order.
Yeah, I went to the it was the PR Week Awards, and it was a big do, and the table, and it was the first time I'd ever been on a table with. I mean, I've been on a table with several sets of cutlery, but I think I had four what glasses, like wine glasses. I had no clue what to do. The water glass, the wine glass, the white wine glass, the red wine glass. There was so many glasses. It was one of the hotels on Mayfair. And again, I just felt totally fish out of water. I knew to go out in. That's what I always remember from the outside in. But other than that, I didn't know which glass to use. I can completely understand that. It's all these etiquettes that you just, if you haven't been...
And you're right. These seem like insignificant points, but really they're not, are they? It's collectively it becomes hugely elite and hugely intimidating, and that comes back to that retention idea. If you are from a working class background, you finally get this job in a big ad agency, and you're constantly made to feel like an alien in that scenario. It's not going to last, is it? And that's the issue.
I think the wine thing's a little bit pretentious, because we drink it out of a jam jar, really, wouldn't we? Doesn't matter what living size it is. So anyway, today's show is the theme of the show is always about fuck ups, and we haven't asked you about yours yet. So it's about marketing fuck ups and what people have learned from them, because our listeners like to hear where people have made a mistake and what they did wrong, because they like to have a little giggle and what they've learned from it. And you sent one through to us, didn't you, Lisa? Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so my attention to detail is not good. It's the thing that has resulted in all of my mistakes. There was one, I remember the first time I'd ever booked an out-of-home campaign, and I'd just not checked the dates that the media owner had sent to me, and I'd the out-of-home campaign was all for an event. So it so it was really important. It was live on a certain date, and I just completely booked the wrong dates. And luckily I kind of got away with it because the media owner helped me out. So that's a tip. Be nice, have relationships, because there'll be a time when you need it. What other mistakes?
So your out of home advert appeared before it happened.
So it was booked for there was events that were happening, and there was 2 events that we were supporting.
Right. Where were they?
One was in London and one was in Manchester. It was when we were working for the BBC, and it was for Asian Network, and there was 2 Mellors, so we were buying out of home around it about the coverage. And when we got the out of home plan, all of the out of home had been booked in 2 cities, but for the same dates. And I remember having this stomach drop moment where I looked at it and was like, I'd signed it off and was like, oh shit, it's not on the right dates. So things I've learned is always check your schedules, or if you're not very good at it, get someone else to check it. But also, actually, it was completely fine. I actually think it ended up being really beneficial, because the media owner sorted us out value and was able to make it work. So always have good relationships with the people that you work with. I'm trying to think if I've done any other, I usually also, other mistakes come from not learning how to keep my gob shut, talking about stuff in the wrong place.
Can't relate to that at all.
I also can't hide my face. So I think there's been lots of mistakes where I've said the wrong thing to the wrong people. And I think that I think the lesson from that is where you say the wrong thing to the wrong people and it gets back to people, is actually think about who your people are at work. There will be times where you need to have a rant and talk about something, but find people who you can trust with that information, who can do it. And this isn't a fuck up, because I actually don't think it's bad to cry at work. I think sometimes you're a bit emotional. But I, quite early on in my career, would just not ask for help, and would get to a state where I was just in such tears. I'd just be burst into tears. And when I cry, I'm red for hours. I'm not a pretty crier. And so everyone would know that you'd been crying. And the outcome was always, why didn't you say you were struggling? So I think that's the other thing. Don't be scared of being don't let people tell you not to be emotional, because it's something we only ever tell women to do, and be emotional. It makes you better at your job, but learn to ask for help. And one of the times I did very spectacularly burst into tears, I was working on something, and we were working. It was when we were working on a pitch, and we had classical music on because it was a classical music brand. Realised classical music does not sit well with me. Like, it stresses me out. Like, you know how some people feel really calming? Like, it doesn't work. So also don't listen to classical music.
Stressed out by, I don't think I've ever met anyone stressed out by classical music.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either.
I don't know, it's like a bit intense. Like, and then I think linking to the attention to detail point, there was a time where I was going to like a meeting in London and like had like completely got the time train wrong that I was supposed to get to, and then realised I was late, and then had a real panic and be like, I'm really sorry, you're gonna have to buy another plane ticket. But I think like I always say this to people, I actually think when you make those big mistakes, it's really important because you learn not to do it again. So it's actually really good to make mistakes. So
exactly,
you will, if you've made an error with something like a schedule, you'll always check it. Like, if you're perfect or brilliant all the time, you don't like learn anything from it. And
nobody would be though. I had a guest recently. They were quite a big guest, and they were going to come on the show. And then she replied to me and said, "I've never made a mistake at work." And I was like, "You definitely have.
You're not trying hard enough if you don't make mistakes, are you? You're not pushing hard enough."
No, like who's never made a mistake? Like,
and also like, even if you've not made like a technical mistake, like I like get things wrong all the time. The amount of time, I'm a big overthinker. The amount of times I'm like lying awake at 3:30 thinking I've like said the wrong thing or I've done something wrong. Like, people like, what I found hard with the question is like none of them, like, I feel like all of the mistakes have been like very like everyday mistakes. Like, they're not like, there's not been anything like almost like with that. Oh, the other kind, it's not a mistake, but I did once fall over in a pitch. So
please elaborate.
Bad. Go on, explain this. What did you do?
We were pitching for a fashion brand, and I bought these like shoes from there that had a heel on, and we were stood up presenting, and we were in like a kind of quite a long room, and I'd not got my space, and I'd like stepped back and somehow got into the wall, and then like didn't like on the floor, but like properly went, and the very lovely guy who we were pitching to was like, "Can we just stop? Are you okay?" And in my head, I was like, "I don't want you to stop. I want you to pretend you've never seen me fall over."
Did you seamlessly continue from the ground?
So I like got back up. I was kind of like half on the ground. I got back up and I was like doing so. The lesson there is like, sometimes you only wear a heel if you're going to be sat down to present. Like, it doesn't work well if you're standing. So yeah, that was.
Did you win the pitch?
Did you win the pitch? Didn't win the pitch. I don't think it was.
I thought you might have won.
Unless they really don't like clumsy people, which if they don't like clumsy people, I'm very clumsy, so it was right. But yeah, I did spectacularly deck it in a pitch.
Stack it.
Yeah.
So a whole menagerie of fuck ups there. Yeah. So yeah, that was good. But you're right. You know, you've got to be making mistakes to learn, haven't you? And that's the whole kind of purpose of this show. So people will be listening to this and thinking, look, this rings true. You know, this is an issue I need to address. Where do people connect with you? How can they find out more about Common People? And how does it manifest itself? There's a WhatsApp group? Is there a website as well?
There's a t-shirt.
So we have a LinkedIn and an Instagram profile. We have a newsletter, which is the Substack is Common People Like Me. So there's a newsletter that goes out monthly, which will share writing on it. We'll share like job opportunities. So sign up for the newsletter. The WhatsApp group, we try and make it so it's people who have lived experience of it, but follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram. We do come in, we have like training decks that we've pulled together. If your business is serious about it and would like to donate to the Common People Fund, we will come in and do that. The other thing is other resources that are amazing. Is Commercial Break, our amazing organisation. James Hillhouse is one of the loveliest men. Like, if you want to kind of get that audit done, have a chat with him. The Social Mobility Foundation are a really good resource as well. So they have their index. And then the other kind of things, if you're really interested in it, The Class Ceiling is a brilliant book by Sam Friedman and Dan Lawrenson. And just like, yeah, there's loads of stuff. There's also it's kind of not specifically creative industries, but there's a really good, brilliant book by a guy called Hashi Mohammed, who is a barrister who the book is called People Like Me or People Like Us, but he talks about how like all of the systematic things in it. And if you Google him, he's appeared on loads of podcasts. So yeah, Common People LinkedIn, Common People Instagram. Sign up to our newsletter, and if you want to chat to any of them, like drop me a LinkedIn or drop me an Instagram message or drop me a note, and we are more than happy to chat.
Fantastic.
And you've been on this show now, Lisa. You've given your views of the world, and you've told us your biggest fuck-ups. And if you were us, who would be the next guest that you would have on this show that we should get on here and question about their marketing mistakes? This is always my favourite bit because no one's got a set answer for this and they have to really think about it.
We've got loads of amazing people in the Common People community who are brilliant. There's actually, I tell you who it is. There is an amazing lady called Emma Jackson who is part of the Common People group, but I kind of got to know her. I think I got to know her through that, but she is a producer. So you know the really cool advert with the guy from Footloose, where the EE advert where they land a plane in the living room. What's the name of the actor, the Footloose guy? Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon. Yeah. Seven steps of Kevin Bacon, or whatever it is.
So she is a producer and has done a lot kind of within advertising and marketing. So she does jobs, and I think she's really cool and really inspiring and has an opinion.
Thanks a lot for coming on the show, Lisa. That was fascinating to chat about. All the different bits and pieces of how people can become more inclusive. It's been an interesting chat. Lovely to meet somebody else from up north as well. And I love all the issues because it's just taken me back to starting my own career. And I'm sure a lot of people have got a lot out of it. So I'd just like to say a personal thank you for everything and your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me and letting me bang on about class diversity for an hour.